Hi everyone and welcome to the last video for Exercise Science 230 for 2016, and this one we're working on the motor pathways, also known as the descending pathways. So I'm going back to the same lecture, so lecture 9, we're starting on slide number 23, and at the top it's got descending motor pathways and it's got 9.6. So the first thing structurally we look at motor pathways, and slightly different from the sensory ones, is it constitutes, rather than looking at 3 different relay processes, we mainly look at upper motor neurons, also classified as UMNs, and lower motor neurons, so LMN. And you'll know in weeks 11 and 12 we talk about dysfunction. Most of that occurs with the upper motor neurons, where there's some sort of damage or disease according to, impacting the upper motor neurons. And that's because they happen in those higher centres where the decision making and processes, and then the cerebral cortex, whereas the lower motor neurons are mainly from the spinal cord to the actual muscles themselves. So by definition, upper motor neurons from higher centres to the spinal cord and brainstem, whereas the lower ones are from the spinal cord to the actual muscles themselves or muscle fibres. So that's the first thing, just by definition, we look at in relation to descending motor pathways. Now, again too, like with the sensory pathways, there's a number of different types of motor pathways, and some of them what we call lateral or medial. Some of them are related to postural control and what they call unconscious, or not unconscious, but rapid control, where the other ones are more to do with different kinds of parts of the body, and how we might control them in relation to motor neurons and to, motor skills, if you like. So in relation to the different types of descending motor pathways, we're not going to go through them all in this particular video. I'm literally just going to go through one of them, which is looking at slide number, going through it now. So we're looking at slide number 29, and it's what to do with what's called the lateral one, and it's the lateral corticospinal pathway. So lateral meaning, if you look at it, it's not a medial response within the cerebral cortex, it's more to do with like they call a lateral tract. So it's not close in, it's more sort of like we said on the lateral side of the cerebral cortex. But mainly what we want to look at this particular on this particular slide, so we're now on slide number 29, is looking at how the actual pathway works. So information's been transferred from the sensory system, information's gone up to that particular part, the VPL, the thalamus if you like, of the cerebral cortex. Now that information is now decided on what we're going to do, and now the pathway or the action to actually be processed now travels downwards, or what they call descending. And this particular situation, you can look at this particular slide, it might be, for example, that we might have something to do with our hands. So there might be something that our hand wants us to do. So the example here is you might be tying a knot or picking up a small object. So also we looked at these particular situations, we looked at prehension, so reaching and grasping for an object. So reaching and grasping for an object, especially if it was a small one, so look at fine motor control, that's a classic example of control that's dictated by this particular motor pathway, which is called the lateral corticospinal pathway. So in this situation here, if that's what we're looking at, we say, okay, well, what happens and where does it occur? So we've got the upper motor neurons, that, like I said before, that happen from the cerebral cortex down to the brainstem, and that happens on one side of the brain. Now then, where it decussates, or where it crosses over to control what happens on that particular side of the body, normally happens, like we said, down here. If you look at that particular slide, it says here, so lateral tract formed by the 85% of fibres that cross over in the medulla. So in the medulla is where it actually crosses over, and from there we go down to the lower motor neurons, so from the brainstem or spinal cord down to the actual muscle fibres themselves, and that's when the action actually takes place. So really here, all we're looking for you to understand is the process by which information goes up the sensory pathway, so ascending, where it terminates in the actual cerebral cortex, and then the action of the motor pathway, and where the information is transferred from the upper motor neuron to a lower motor neuron, to where we actually make the decision, or actually perform the action, I should say, which could be reaching and grasping for an object. Now I know that in the lectures, and a lot of stuff we do is a lot more detailed, but for you where you're at for this particular unit, and for what we're trying to get you to understand in this for the exam itself, that is enough information for you to be able to understand, and then hopefully try to, if needed or required, to actually try to digest, and then let us know in the exam situation how you understand the difference between an ascending or a sensory pathway and a descending and a motor pathway. It's also really important to make sure you understand the basic attributes of your muscle fibers, your motor units, and also to making sure you understand the difference in the neurons, the aspects and parts of the neurons, how we've got different types of neurons for different actions, what type of neurons are mostly found in the spinal cord, and making sure you understand their function. So really, that's where it's at for this particular lecture. But like I said, if you need any more information on this, or you don't understand anything from this particular video, just email me the specific question and I can answer that and let you know how much detail you might need to know for the exam. Hopefully that's helped you. Good luck in the exam and good luck for your study, and no doubt we'll hear from you guys soon. Okay, cheers.